Chapter 2. The Heat on the Couch. Next evening, Chloe moves through the apartment with a strained, careful sort of grace, as if the floor were littered with invisible tripwires. Every time the guest room door creaked, her shoulders would tense. The lingering scent of Sandra's spicy perfume felt like a physical presence in the room, a constant, taunting reminder of the woman in the green silk robe and the knowing, devastating smirk that had been burnt into Chloe's memory. She was determined to reset. Last night was a fluke, a product of exhaustion and the strangeness of having a new person in her space. Sandra was just being Sandra, confident, uninhibited. It meant nothing. Chloe repeated this mantra in her head until the words felt smooth and meaningless. Her resolve was bolstered by Mark's solid presence beside her on the couch. He was her rock, her normality. With his arm slung casually around her shoulders, the world felt stable again. "Hey, babe," Mark said, nuzzling her hair after swallowing a bite of the pizza they were sharing. "Bad news. Steve just texted. His fantasy football draft is tonight, and he needs a fourth. I told him I'd bail him out." Chloe's heart did a slow, heavy plummet. "Oh, tonight? Yeah, sorry. It'll only be a couple of hours." He gave her a squeeze. "You and Sandra can have a girls' night. It'll be fun." He seemed genuinely pleased by the idea, utterly oblivious to the silent panic flaring in Chloe's chest. Sandra emerged from her room at that moment, dressed in form, fitting yoga pants and a simple tank top that somehow looked more provocative than the silk robe. Her hair was piled in a messy, artful bun on top of her head. "Girls' night? What are we doing?" she asked, her eyes sparkling as she flopped gracefully into the armchair. "Mark is abandoning us," Chloe said, trying to keep her tone light. "His loss is our gain," Sandra said with a grin that was both friendly and predatory. She stretched her arms over her head, the movement pulling the thin fabric of her top taut across her chest. Chloe forced herself to look away, her gaze landing on the TV screen. An hour later, Mark was gone, leaving a void in the room that felt immense and terrifying. The silence that fell between Chloe and Sandra was thick with unspoken things. The memory of last night's smirk hung between them, a ghost at the feast. So Sandra began, breaking the quiet. "What are two beautiful women to do on a lonely night in?" "We could watch a movie," Chloe suggested, her voice sounding small and weak to her own ears. It was a safe option, a normal option, a way to fill the silence and avoid looking at each other for 2 hours. "Perfect," Sandra's eyes lit up. "But not one of your romantic dramas. I saw your collection tonight. We need something with a little more bite." She took the remote from the coffee table, her fingers brushing Chloe's as she did. The contact was feather-light, accidental, but it sent a jolt of Chloe's arm like a static shock. Sandra navigated the streaming service with practiced ease, her thumb hovering over the horror section. "How do you feel about things that go bump in the night?" Chloe hated horror movies. They made her jumpy and anxious. But protesting felt like admitting weakness, like she couldn't handle it, like she was scared, and she was, but not of the movie. "Fine," she said, her voice tight. "Whatever you want." "Excellent choice," Sandra murmured, clicking on a movie whose poster featured a shadowy figure with glowing eyes lurking behind the terrified woman. She killed the main lights, plunging the room into a dim, intimate gloom lit only by the flickering television. Chloe hugged a throw pillow to her chest like a shield. The couch, which usually felt vast, suddenly seemed far too small. Sandra didn't sit in the armchair or on the far end of the sofa. She settled onto the cushion right next to Chloe, leaving only a hand's breadth of space between their thighs. Chloe could feel the heat radiating from Sandra's body. The movie began with eerie music and unsettling, quiet scenes. Chloe tried to focus on the plot, on the dialogue, on anything other than the woman beside her. For she was hyper-aware of every tiny movement Sandra made, the scent of her skin, the soft sound of her breathing. The air grew heavy, charged with an electric tension that had nothing to do with the film. 20 minutes in, the first real jump scare came. A face screamed into the camera, accompanied by a deafening shriek of sound. Chloe yelped, a genuine startled sound, jumping so hard the pillow flew from her grasp. In the same instant, Sandra's hand clamped down on her thigh. "Whoa, got you?" Sandra laughed, a low, throaty sound. But she didn't let go. The moment stretched, The movie continued its gory progression on the screen, but Chloe couldn't see it. She couldn't hear it. All of her senses were focused on the 5 points of pressure on her leg. Sandra's hand was warm and strong, a shocking, solid weight through the thin cotton of her lounge pants. Chloe's breath hitched. Her mind screamed at her to move, to laugh it off, to pull her leg away and restore the boundary. But her body was frozen, paralyzed by a potent cocktail of fear and a dark, thrilling excitement. Then, slowly, deliberately, Sandra's thumb began to move. It wasn't a nervous twitch. It was an intentional caress, a slow, hypnotic stroke tracing the curve of Chloe's thigh. Up and down, a lazy, possessive rhythm that sent waves of fire through her veins. It was the most explicit, undeniable thing anyone had ever done to her without speaking a word. The lines weren't just blurred anymore. Sandra was actively erasing them with a marker. Chloe's heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic, wild drumbeats. She risked a glance at Sandra. Sandra wasn't watching the movie. She was watching Chloe. Her face was cast in the shifting blue light of the television, her expression unreadable but for the intense, focused look in her eyes. She saw Chloe's wide-eyed panic, the subtle tremor in her lips, and that wicked, knowing half-smile played at the corners of her mouth again, the same one from last night. She leaned in closer, her lips almost touching Chloe's ear. Her breath was a hot puff of air against Chloe's skin, sending a shiver down her entire spine. "Scared?" Sandra whispered, her voice a velvety murmur that cut through the sounds of on-screen carnage. The word was a double-edged sword. Was she scared of the movie? Or was she scared of this? Of the hand on her leg? Of the heat coiling low in her belly? Of the fact that she hadn't moved, hadn't protested, hadn't done anything at all to stop it? Chloe's couldn't answer. She could only sit there, breathless and pinned by Sandra's gaze, her entire world shrinking down to the illicit, electrifying heat of a hand on her thigh. The movie, her boyfriend, her stable, predictable life, it all faded into a distant hum. There was only the couch, the darkness, and the terrifying, exhilarating reality of Sandra's touch.